And good afternoon, and welcome to Amped right here on WODU Studios. I am Michael High, and I will be along with you for the next hour or so. So, we're having a little bit of technical difficulties here in the studio today. Just bear with me, and we'll try to get it fixed or try to move on without it. But right now, I don't know if anybody heard, Metallica is going to be playing the Super Bowl this year. So, I am pretty stoked about that. One of my favorite bands, and I think it's actually one of the better choices they've had in quite a while. So we're going to get this show started like we always do with a little bit of music, one song by Metallica itself as a tribute to them for being selected this year. Going to play one of their classics, Inner Sandman. And when we come back, we will get right into the headlines of the week for all of the major sports right here on WDU, the best of college radio. And welcome back to Amped right here on WODU, the best in college radio. Like I said earlier, I'm Michael High, and I'll be here for the next hour or so. That was Metallica Enter Sandman. If you just joined me, they're going to be the halftime show at this year's Super Bowl, which will be the 50th Super Bowl. So I know the NFL is pumped about that. They want to get a lot of crowd excitement and stuff like that. So one thing I can almost guarantee, they won't have a wardrobe malfunction with Metallica out there. But it should be an interesting halftime show and very entertaining. So, with that being said, let's get right into the news this week on the NFL front. The big news is the quarterback situations in the game. There's 32 teams in the league, and right now, 7 of those 32 teams have used a backup quarterback for one reason or another. Um, yeah, some of them are like the Jets, who ended up having an injury to Geno Smith in preseason when he got punched in the face and broke his jaw. And for them, it's actually worked out pretty well. Ryan Fitzpatrick has taken them to 2 wins, a win over Cleveland at home last week, and then this past Monday night, they went into Lucas Oil and defeated what everybody kind of picked to be the Super Bowl champs, or at least make a Super Bowl appearance this year, the Indianapolis Colts, and they beat them pretty handily. I don't think it was as close as the score indicated. So that's one situation. The big situation is the situation in Dallas. NFC East, going into the season, everybody thought it was going to be a 2-team race between Dallas and the Philadelphia Eagles. The Giants are kind of discombobulated, and the Redskins always do what they normally do. But right now, it actually looks like if it's going to be a 2-team race, it could come down to the Giants and the Redskins, depending on what happens in Dallas. If you have not heard, I don't know what rock you've been under, but that's all right. Glad you're out of it. And Tony Romo is out at 7 games, 8 weeks. Will not be available to play again before the November 22nd game against the Miami Dolphins. He broke his clavicle that he broke back in 2010, so re-injured that. And now, even though the Cowboys are sitting 2-0, they are kind of in a bad situation with Dez Bryant and Tony Romo out. Also on the Cowboys, Whedon's the quarterback. He's going to be the one making the start on Monday or Sunday for the Cowboys as they host the Atlanta Falcons. Tight end Jason Witten came up a little hobbled on Sunday. But one thing that's not hurt right now is their defense. Their defense is playing very well, and they shut down DeMarco Murray in his first matchup against the Cowboys since leaving the Cowboys during the offseason. Had 2 total rushing yards. He now has 11 rushes on 21 carries this season. So he's kind of struggling. And if you remember correctly, when I talked about it last spring, Jessica and I talked about it. Running back is probably the most overpaid position in the league, in my opinion. They're a dime a dozen. You can always get them to replace them. Mike Shanahan proved that both in Denver and Washington, as he would always get a 6th-round pick or 5th-round pick, late-round pick, whatever, and they would go in and run for many, many yards. Done the same thing now, even though he's not there. Alfred Morris is over in Washington, another 6th-round pick, and he's running very well. So I think they made the smart move by paying Dez Bryant all the money and not paying the running back. But defense gets some help. In a couple of weeks, they've got a couple of guys coming off suspension. And once those guys come off suspension, they'll just add to what the defense is doing. Sean Lee, good to have him back. It's been about a year and a half since he really played his last game. Got injured again last year during the preseason. But he is now the defensive player of the week this past week in the NFL after his 14-tackle performance against the Philadelphia Eagles. And if you did not watch that game, it was hard to watch. Even being a Cowboys fan, it was very hard to watch. The offenses for both teams struggled. The offense for the Cowboys struggled more, I think, with Romo at offense than it did, or under center, than it did when Whedon came in. Not a huge proponent of Brandon Whedon, but he did go 7 for 7, throw a touchdown on a slant route to Terrence Williams. And it's just one of those things that he looked pretty good when he came in. But the Cowboys secured that. They see all the quarterback controversy and all the quarterbacks that are getting injured and stuff like that. Drew Brees is possibly going to end up going down with a shoulder injury. Uh, McCown got hurt in Cleveland the first week. He was replaced by Johnny Manziel, who led the Browns to a game on or win on Sunday. But now, of course, McCown's supposed to be back this week after passing the protocol. And I think the Cowboys just went out and took a chance and made sure they got some help before it was too late. You know, guys like Tim Tebow are out there, Kyle Orton, but that didn't end very well with the Cowboys last year between the Cowboys organization and Kyle Orton. Christian Ponder, former Florida State quarterback, was out there. He was also out at Cowboys training camp or training facility. Josh Johnson, not sure who Josh Johnson or McLeod Bethel Thompson is. Not sure who either one of those guys are. But they went out and they made a trade with the Buffalo Bills for Matt Castle. If you don't remember Matt Castle, he's the one that made a lot of money and went to Kansas City after his great season where he stepped in for Tom Brady there in New England and led them to a playoff run with 11 wins. I think they missed the playoffs that year, if I'm not mistaken, but still 11 wins that year with him under center. The problem is it's a salary cap problem. Cassell's going to make $2 million, which is a lot more than Whedon's $660,000. So there's also incentives and stuff like that, playing time, playoffs, $2.15 million. But they didn't give up a whole lot. They got Castle and they got a draft pick in 2017. Wait a minute, the Cowboys, they got the Bills' 7th round pick in 2017, and they gave up their 5th rounder in 2017. So they didn't give up a whole lot to get Castle. He's a good backup choice. And as a matter of fact, if Whedon struggles at all, I would not be surprised if Jason Garrett went ahead and put him in the starting role, give him a week to get some playing time with the first string. Now, that's the interesting thing there in Dallas with first string. Tony Romo doesn't usually practice on Wednesdays. He hasn't been doing that for a couple of years now. So Whedon usually gets all the reps with first string on Monday. So he should know the offense pretty well. Have to see what happens and see how that works out. Other quarterbacks in the news. Andrew Luck struggled again on Sunday. Derek Carr came back and brought back his Oakland Raiders. They picked up a win over the Baltimore Ravens. Blake Bortles comeback win over the Miami Dolphins for the Jacksonville Jaguars. Trying to think what else is. Oh, Brian Hoyer has been replaced there in Houston with Ryan Mallett. That was a first week change. I mentioned Drew Brees and McCown and Johnny Manziel there in Cleveland. So interesting what's going on with a lot of injuries right now in the league. The Cowboys are also not sure how true this is, so I'm not saying this is gospel, but I have seen reports that there may be talks. I don't know if it's coming from T.O.'s side or from both sides, but T.O. wants to come back and play for the Cowboys while Dez Bryant's out. I think it would be a huge mistake for the Cowboys bringing T.O. back. He didn't have a whole lot left when he was there to begin with, so we'll have to see. When we get back, we're going to go into some of the games coming up this week and some of the interesting side notes with each one of those games. I'm going to play you a little Toby Keith, American Soldier, right here on AMP, on WODU Studios.
I'm just trying to be a father, raise a daughter and a son, be a lover to their mother, everything to everyone, up and out on bright and early, all business in my suit. Yeah, I'm dressed up for success, from my head down to my boots. I don't do it for the money, there's bills that I can't pay. I don't do it for the glory, I just do it anyway. Providing for our responsibility. Yeah, I'm real good on the pressure, being all that I can be. I can't call in sick on Mondays when the weekend's been too strong. I just work straight through the holidays, sometimes all night long. You can bet that I stand ready when the wolf growls at the door. Yeah, I'm solid, yeah, I'm steady, yeah, I'm true down to the core. And I will always do my duty, no matter what the price. I've counted up the cost, I know the sacrifice. Oh, and I don't wanna die for you, but if dying's asking me, I'll bear that cross with honor. 'Cause freedom don't come free. I'm an American soldier, an American. Beside my brothers and my sisters, I will proudly take the stand. When liberty's in jeopardy, I will always do what's right. I'm out here on the front line, sleep in peace tonight. American soldier, I'm an American soldier. Yeah, American soldier, an American. Beside my brothers and my sisters, I will proudly take a stand. When liberty's in jeopardy, I will always do what's right. I'm out here on the front line, sleep in peace tonight. American soldier, I'm an American, an American, an American soldier.
And welcome back to Amped right here on WODU Studios, the best in college radio. That was Toby Keith, American Soldier. Shout out to all of our vets and active duty military that may be listening right now. Anyway, let's get right into the games coming up this week, the intriguing games. Of course, it's going to be the Atlanta Dallas game. It's going to be a huge game Sunday afternoon at 1 o'clock. Both teams 2-0. Of course, Dallas is going through their injury situation. So Atlanta has beaten both the Philadelphia Eagles and the New York Giants, foes of the Cowboys. So that's helped them over the last 2 weeks. But Atlanta's in a big race right now with the NFC South, too, as well. Only 2 weeks in, I understand that. But Carolina's 2-0 as well. So these early game matchups sometimes may not seem like they mean a whole lot, but every game counts. Speaking of counting, surprise, surprise, the Oakland Raiders and the Cleveland Browns. After this week, one of those two teams will be 2-1, as Derek Carr and the Oakland Raiders will travel to Cleveland and take on, not sure who the quarterback is going to be, and that Cleveland Browns defense that really did a job on rookie quarterback Mariota this weekend. After having such a great week and being perfect on QBR the week before his opening game, Mariota really struggled against the Browns as they forced fumbles and interceptions and everything like that. Good for me because it helped my fantasy team with 19 points, but it was a little bit of a surprise for everybody. So somebody would be sitting 2-1 after week 3, which I don't think anybody really expected that. Speaking of another team that could be 2-1, the Washington Redskins travel to New York tomorrow night, travel to the Meadowlands to take on the New York Giants. The Giants have become the first team in the modern era to blow two double-digit leads to start the season. Remember a few years back, Cowboys did that, but they didn't do it back to back to open the season. They did open up against the Jets with a double-digit loss. They also had about 4 or 5 games that year as well. So the Giants are on a string right now to break the record for most double-digit losses in a season. But with everything going on in Dallas and Philadelphia, this is a huge game in the NFC East because if the Giants were to win this one, it would put them potentially one game behind the Cowboys. And who knows what could happen with the Cowboys going in forward. And Washington had a lot of momentum. They played very well against Miami the week one, come up with a short loss there, 7-point loss on a punt return. But then last week they really handled the St. Louis Rams, who was beating them three times in a row, I believe, going into this week. So big game there. Another big game in this or the AFC South. Mariota hosts the Indianapolis Colts. Now that's one trend that Indianapolis. I know they started 0-2 last year, rattled off 5 out of the next 7 games they won. Indianapolis really doesn't have to get much above 500 to win that division normally. So who knows? They may still be in it. They look kind of sick the first 2 weeks of the season, though. And they're 0-2. They're one of 9 0-2 teams in the league. Cincinnati travels to Baltimore for a huge matchup in the AFC North Division. Cincinnati's another one of those 2-0 teams. Baltimore's 0-2. Baltimore has had to travel to the West Coast 2 weeks in a row and face off against Denver and San Diego. Or Oakland, excuse me. So we'll have to see how they react this time. They'll be back at home in Baltimore. They have the Bengals coming in, and should be a pretty good matchup. I haven't decided who I'm picking on that one yet. Jacksonville, New England. Even though Jacksonville beat Miami last week, I don't see Jacksonville going into New England and beating the Patriots, whether they mess with the audio or not. So I don't really think that's going to be too big of an issue there for them. Let's see. We got Philadelphia and the Jets. Like I said earlier, the Eagles are going to travel down to the Meadowlands. So both New York teams will be home this week, one on Thursday and one on Sunday. And Philadelphia will have to make 2 trips into the Meadowlands this year to take on the Jets and the Giants later on this year. And they say that Geno Smith should be back after week 4. We'll have to see if the Jets go 3-0, or 3-1, or 4-0. He may lose his job. Now, I've never been a proponent to a guy losing his job because of injury, but that's a potential issue right there. It could be a little bit of quarterback controversy going on in the NFC or AFC East with the Jets this year. Let's see. We got an interconference matchup between the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and the Houston Astros. Not sure who's going to start at quarterback for the Astros. I'm not sure who's going to start at quarterback for the Houston Texans. Excuse me. As I said earlier, Ryan Mallett was brought in week 1 for Brian Hoyer, but Mallett struggled again this week. Jameis Winston went into New Orleans and got a huge win last week after being embarrassed at home in week 1. So who figured they would be able to go into New Orleans and get their first win? They're 1-1 going into a week against Houston Texans. The Texans could be out of this race here real quick if they do not start winning. Another one of those 0-2 teams. I think one of the most intriguing matchups, especially in the first set of games on Sunday, mostly because the Cowboys don't have Tony Romo and Dez Bryant, is San Diego and Minnesota Vikings. San Diego played very well 2 weeks in a row, come out with a 1-1 record against Cincinnati and Baltimore, but they got a pretty good shot at going into Minnesota. The key is Minnesota got back to the running game. First time in over a year that Adrian Peterson had over 100 yards rushing. So I think for Minnesota, if they want to continue to have success, they're going to have to run the ball. I think that's going to be their key to win that if they're going to continue winning. Pittsburgh, St. Louis should be an interesting game. St. Louis defeated the NFC champs 2 weeks ago. when Seattle came to town, and then last week they went to Washington and laid an egg. So a lot of their guys were talking about how they need to keep putting momentum and putting them back to back wins. Well, this is an opportunity to pick up two out of your first three against what could really be three strong teams. If the Redskins are better than what everybody expected. Another huge matchup in the NFC West between San Francisco and Arizona. Arizona's, everybody's starting to jump on Arizona, but they were a good team last year. They lost their quarterback, so of course they beat the two teams they should have beat. So they're 2-0. San Francisco 1-1. St. Louis 1-1. So it could be very interesting what starts to develop in that NFC West. Keynote with that though is I'll get to this when the Seattle game comes up. Buffalo, Miami, always a fun game to watch. Not always two best teams, but they usually play pretty good games against each other. So Buffalo travels down to Miami. Virginia Tech alumni Tyrod Taylor is looking really good. I'm going to look and see if I can pick him up on fantasy. Had 25 points this past week, which who would have thought he would be having more fantasy points than Andrew Luck by now. And then Seattle, Chicago. Seattle should win that one pretty easily because Jay Cutler's out, but that wouldn't matter anyway. And then a boring game on Monday night or Sunday night as Denver hosts or Denver travels to Detroit. Should be interesting to see that one. But then what may be the best game of the weekend, the Kansas City Chiefs travel to Green Bay on Monday night, 2-0 Green Bay Packers, and the 1-1 Kansas City Chiefs. But speaking of the Packers, can you believe this James Jones? This dude is just unbelievable. He's been cut twice in the last year. One right at the end of training camp, goes back to Green Bay, and now he has already 3 or 4 touchdowns in 2 weeks. Unbelievable what he does when he plays with Aaron Rodgers. He led the league 2 years ago in touchdowns, and he's right on pace right now to do it again as well. So that's your recap of the games coming up this week. We'll play another song. Let's see, what do we want to play today? We'll play Crash My Party. How about that? With all these injuries going on, a lot of parties are being crashed. Luke Bryan, right here on WODU, the best in college radio.
It don't matter what plans I got, I can break them. Yeah, I can turn this thing around at the next red line. And I don't mind telling all the guys I can't meet them. Hell, we can all go raise some hell on any other night. Girl, I don't care, oh, I just gotta see what you're wearing. Your hair is it pulled up or falling down? Oh, I just have to see it now. If you wanna call me, call me, call me. You don't have to worry about it, baby. You could wake me up in the dead of the night. Break my plans, baby, that's alright. This is a drop everything kind of thing. Swing on by, I'll pour you a drink. The door's unlocked, I'll leave on the lights. Baby, you can't crash my party anytime. Ain't a spot downtown that's rocking the way that you rock me. Ain't a bar that can make me buzz the way that you do. I could be on the front row of the best show and look down and see your face on my phone. And I've gone so long, hang on, I'll meet you in a minute or two. If you wanna call me, call me, call me. You don't have to worry about it, baby. You can wake me up in the dead of the night. Break my plans, baby, that's alright. This is a drop, everything kind of thing. Swing on by, I'll pour you a drink. The door's unlocked, I'll leave on the lights. Baby, you can't crash my party anytime. Call me. Cause you don't have to worry about it, baby. You can wake me up in the dead of the night. Break my plans, baby, that's alright. This is a drop, everything kind of fake. Swing on by, I'll pour you a drink. The door's unlocked, I'll leave on the lights. Baby, you can crash my party anytime. Baby, you can crash my party anytime.
And welcome back to Amped right here on WODU Studios, the best in college radio. And I wanted to get into the playoff scenarios. Not that it's anywhere near time for playoff scenarios, but interesting fact, there's only 11% of teams that start out the season 0-2 in the NFL make the playoffs, and that goes back to when they expanded to 12 teams or 2 wildcard teams back in the 90s. Of those teams that are 0-2 already, interestingly enough, there's, what is there, 9 or 11 of them? You got the Ravens. Let's see. You got the Ravens, the Colts, the Texans, the Giants, the Eagles, Lions, Bears, Saints, Seahawks. There's 9 of them. So ironically, that's 1 out of 9 would give you that 11%. So it's right on the average normally. So one of those teams most likely will make the playoffs out of those teams that have started 0-2. My guess would have to be the Indianapolis Colts. I believe Tennessee is about a year or 2 away from really competing for that division. Jacksonville's maybe a year or 2 away. Need a few more parts. But Indianapolis, if they can right the ship, I think they're going to be fine. Houston, I think, might finish last in that division this year. The Ravens, they're an interesting story. They always, every once in a while, they'll struggle with the Browns, or them and Pittsburgh have big battles. Them and Cincinnati have big battles. I just think it's going to be maybe too hard now to come back and win that division with the Bengals already 2-0, Pittsburgh 1-1. Excuse me. One of those weeks. And the AFC East is just stacked this year. And the AFC West doesn't look like it's going to be too bad either. So Baltimore is in danger of not even making the playoffs this year, in my opinion. In the NFC, like I said, Philadelphia, unless they figure out how to run the ball for more than 2 yards, they could have a really long season. The Giants are 0-2. They look really discombobulated. Who knows what's going to go on with them? The Bears are in trouble. The Lions have no defense compared to what they've had. They're already giving up 15 more points than they scored already in just 2 games. So they're in trouble. The Saints, I thought they were going to be a team that was going to win that division this year. The NFC South is usually one of those divisions that you can go from last to first in a year. But we did not expect Tampa Bay to do it. And now the Saints are the one that's in last place, 0-2. Drew Brees has a rotator cuff injury. Not sure how long he's going to be out for, but I don't see, his backup makes commercials, but do any of us really know anything about him? Not really. So I don't expect anything to happen with them. The one team that I could actually see 2 teams making it. The Seattle Seahawks, 0-2. They get Cam Chancellor back. And this is what I was going to bring up earlier. Cam Chancellor's supposed to be back in the building this week. Not sure if he's going to be fined yet. I think he should be fined because if he doesn't, it sets a very bad precedent around the league. And I think a lot of other owners are going to have problems finding their players if Cam Chancellor does not get fined for holding out. And all the fine is he just loses his 2 game shakes, which, for a guy like Cam Chancellor, you're talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars, but he chose to do that for he wanted to get more money. So I think he's going to end up losing some money anyway. He may get a longer money when the deal's done, if the deal gets done. But I think he's going to come back whether the deal's done or not. He's still got 3 years left on his original contract that he just signed last year or the year before. So he's, you know, but he will be back. That'll make a difference. The question I have is which Rams team is going to show up this year? Can the Cardinals stay healthy? And San Francisco, nobody can figure San Francisco out. They throttled Minnesota at home 2 weeks ago, and then the other night they just looked horrible on Sunday. Of course, they lost Carlos Hyde to a leg contusion, but he should be back. So that all depends on where he goes, how that's going to help Kaepernick in their passing game with his running ability. The NFC West is very, very tough, but the reason I say the Seahawks could get in, possibly, all the NFC West could get 3 teams in because the Cowboys are the best team in the NFC East if they have all their parts. They don't have all their parts. So they may end up slumping. The Giants and the Eagles are both in trouble, it looks like. Washington could sneak in and win that division, or they're going to end up slipping completely out of it. Who knows? I like Kirk Cousins. I just wish he was on a different team. I think he's great. That was a great choice by them not playing RG3 this year. And thank you, Jerry Jones, for not signing or trading for RG3. That would have been an even bigger headache. NFC North, Minnesota, because they're an iffy team right now. I think they'll get in. I do think they'll still get in. I think one team gets in from the NFC South, one gets in from the NFC East, 2 get in from the NFC North, and 2 from the NFC West. And that just depends. The Rams right now hold the tiebreaker over Seattle. I know it's early, but I do think there's possibility 2 teams get in out of those 9. So I think they could buck the trend this year and go a little bit more than what is normal. All right, so that's all the football for today. Don't forget, Old Dominion has Appalachian State coming in town 3:30 on Saturday afternoon. If you don't have a ticket, you can check the game out right here on WODU Studios as we are going to be live with the play-by-play. Not sure who's calling it this week for the studios, but somebody will be definitely calling it. And then they'll be on the road after that for, I believe they got a week and then an off day. So I think it's going to be about 3 weeks before Old Dominion comes back right here to the Norfolk area. Had a tough game against NC State the other day, but it's one of those things that, it just, when you go up against those big squads from those big schools, it can happen. So Coach Wilder said there probably in a couple of years that'll be his team. The savvy quarterback. They have a senior leading quarterback. Still have a young team, but they had a senior quarterback there at NC State who kept his composure and stuff like that. When we come back, we'll get into baseball, and also one of the saddest bits of news that I've heard in quite a while came across the wire this morning. So we're going to play you Johnny Cash's Folsom Prison Blues live from the Folsom Prison in California, right here on WODU, the best in college radio.
Hello, I'm Johnny Cash. I hear the train a-comin', it's rollin' around a bend, and I ain't seen the sunshine since I don't know when. I'm stuck in Folsom Prison, and time keeps dragging on. But that train keeps a-rollin' on down to San Antone. When I was just a baby, my mama told me, son, always be a good boy, don't ever play with guns. But I shot a man in Reno just to watch him die. When I hear that whistle blowing, I hang my head and cry. I bet there's rich folks eating from a fancy dining car. They're probably drinking coffee and smoking big cigars. Well, I know I had it coming. I know I can't be free. But those people keep a moving, and that's what tortures me. Well, if they freed me from this prison, if that railroad train was mine, I bet I'd move it on a little farther down the line, far from Folsom Prison. That's where I want to stay. And I'd let that lonesome whistle all my blues away.
And welcome back to Amped right here on WOD Studios. And we played one legend, Johnny Cash. Kind of my own little tribute to another legend. The world lost a great man and a great Hall of Fame baseball player and manager today, Yogi Berra. He passed away at the age of 90. Now, if I say Yogi, you know who I'm talking about. But he was born. Yogi was just a name that he picked up growing up. He was actually born Lawrence Peter Berra. So you would never know who I was talking about if I said Yogi, Lawrence Peter Berra, but everybody knows the name Yogi. Inspired cartoon character, the great bear Yogi. Always had some funny, witty things to say, just like the real Yogi Berra did. Yogi Berra won 10 world championships as a player with the New York Yankees, went on to win 3 more as a manager. He managed both the Mets and the New York Yankees. He's one of the top players of the century. Was honored at the 1999 All-Star Game in Boston. Just one of the great guys in the sport. He was loved around the world. Some of the things that you may have heard and you didn't realize where they came from, if you're not really a huge baseball fan, "It ain't over till it's over" was one of his things during the 1973 pennant race when he was managing the New York Mets. And it's one of the things he just said, "It ain't over till it's over." Also, one that's heard a lot of times in commencement speeches at graduations, still to this day. When you come to a fork in the road, take it. That was in a speech at a graduation at Montclair State in 1996, and it's still used now. One of the ones I think is probably one of the funniest I've ever heard is "Deja Vu" all over again. I mean, that was just a classic Yogi Berra line. 5'8" guy, maybe 200 pounds with all of his equipment on. Of course, the equipment back when he played is not as heavy as it was. He's a Purple Heart winner, or no, I guess you don't win the Purple Heart. He was injured in World War II, as so many great of our, especially baseball players and some of the football players, seized during World War II. Yogi Berra was one of them. Served in Normandy on a gunboat on D-Day. Let's see some more Yogi-isms. Nobody goes there anymore. It's too crowded. I can't think and hit at the same time. That was when his coach, he was talking to his coach, Charlie Dreesen, his hitting coach. If you can't intimidate him, don't copy him. If you can't imitate him, don't copy him. Excuse me. And another great one that I really enjoyed was 90% of the game is half mental. And I actually think it went more. Baseball is 90% mental. The other half is physical. Is the real way that it was really spoken. And then one of his most comical ones was, "I want to thank everybody for making this day necessary." So, Yogi, wherever you are, thanks for what you've done for the game of baseball and humanity as well. Um, Great man from everything that you've ever read about Yogi. Great athlete. Didn't always have the best talent, but he was definitely one of the better players to ever play the game. Um, One of the tweets comes from CC Sabathia, he's a current Yankee player, Yankee pitcher. "Blessed to have known you. You are a true hero and a legend and will always be in our hearts. Hashtag rest in peace, Yogi Berra. Hashtag Yankees." Um, he hung around the clubhouse many, many years after he retired, all the way up until a few years ago when he really got sick there at the end. So, kind of a sad day to find out that Yogi passed away last night. Ironically, his Yankees come back and beat the Toronto Maple Leafs in extra innings, close their gap up to 2.5 with one game left between those two this year. That game's tonight, game 3 of the series. Sets up a very interesting thing with just 2 weeks to go, less than 2 weeks to go in the season, about 12 days to go. The Yankees lose this one tonight, they'll be 3.5 back with about 11 games to go. But if they win this one, they'll be a game and a half back at Toronto, and anything can happen. You just don't want to leave your luck up to somebody else. Leave it in your control. Kind of like the other New York team. New York Mets are 6.5 up on the Washington Nationals. Could have really put some damage to the Nationals' hope last night, but they ended up getting upset by Atlanta at home. The Nationals blew every opportunity to pick up a game last night. 3 errors, and I believe about 9 walks for the Nationals against the Orioles, but somehow the Orioles ended up winning that game 4-1. So it's 12 games to go, or excuse me, 11 for the Mets, 12 for the Nationals to go. The Mets are 85 and 66 compared to Washington 78 and 72. Magic number is down to 6. If you don't know how the magic number works, every time the Mets win or every time the National loses, that number gets smaller and smaller. So you can actually lose two numbers off that magic number every day. So the Mets, the earliest they can clinch is 3 days from now, but they still have a series against the Nationals at the end of the season, the last weekend of the season. So the Nationals' goal right now is to have it to 3 games or less come October 1st, next Thursday. If they can have it to 3 games or less, they've got a shot at closing out or catching the Mets, and they could also put a lot of pressure on the Mets to win those at least one of those games in New York. So a lot of baseball left to go. Mets collapsed back in 07, had a similar lead with about 17, 18 days to go and blew it. But the National League is pretty much set. Who's going to get in? The Cards have already secured a victory in the play, or they've already secured at least a playoff spot with their victory a couple nights ago. I know that makes my buddy Reggie Bailey happy. Cards still stink, Reggie, in my opinion, but that's my opinion. Now, I have to give them respect. They're a great organization. They do it the right way. Just don't like them because growing up a Mets fan, you never really were a big St. Louis Cardinals fan. But congratulations to them. They're already in the playoffs. Pittsburgh sits 4 back, and Chicago sits back 6 back in the Central Division. Their magic number is getting even smaller. I believe theirs is about 9 games to go. So let's see. Let's see if I can pull this up for you. Kansas City right now sits as the number 1 seed. Toronto's the number 2 seed. The Yankees have a better record than the Rangers, but the Yankees would be the 4 seed because they're not a division winner. The Rangers would be the Western Conference or Western Division winner of the American League. They held a They're 1 up in the win column and 3 up in the loss column to the Astros. So they hold a 2-game lead over the Astros for that last playoff spot. But a great job by the Astros. Nobody thought they'd go 500 this year, and they're going to end up finishing over 500. The Twins. So right now the Yankees have a 4-game lead over the Astros for that the 2 wild card spots. The Astros have a 2-game lead over the Twins, 2.5 over the Angels, and a 4.5-game lead over the Indians. The Indians have surged. They've dropped 1 game below 500 now after the recent surge, but they're still in the chance. They're still got a chance to make it a playoffs, but it's very slim. They really need to win the next 2 out of 3 the next 2 against the Minnesota Twins if they want to have a shot. So there's a lot left to be played for in the American League. It looks like Kansas City is just about to wrap theirs up. Matter of fact, I think their magic number is down to about 3. Toronto, like I said, they've got a game and a half. Excuse me, they have a game and a half lead on the Yankees. No. I'm sorry, 2.5. Right, I'm right. They're a game and a half behind Kansas City for the best overall record in the American League. The Yankees are about 8 games away from wrapping up a playoff spot, or their magic number is about 8. Texas and Houston are probably going to come down to the last day, I would imagine. I don't think the Angels have anything sitting 4.5 back of the Rangers right now with 12 days to go. I don't think they really have a shot at catching them for the division race, but they've still got a shot at catching for the overall playoff spots. So in the National League, you got the St. Louis Cardinals 4 games up on the Pirates, 6 games up on the Cubs, all 3 in the National League Central. Los Angeles Dodgers would be the actual number 2 seed at 9.5 behind the Cardinals. And the Mets would be the number 3 seed right now, with the Pirates and the Cubs hosting at Pittsburgh, who sit 2 games ahead of the Cubs for that 1-game playoff. The winner of that game would then go on to play the St. Louis Cardinals if the playoffs started today. San Francisco is actually, how many games back are they? They're 6 behind the Dodgers, and they're 9.5 behind the Cubs for that last wild card spot. So their best chance is to try to catch the Dodgers, but it's a very slim chance now. The Nationals are 6.5 behind the Mets. Like I said, their chance of making the playoffs is 1%. They're not going to catch the Cubs, being 10.5 games behind the Cubs for that last wild card spot. Their only chance is to make a playoff or is make a wild card run. That is going to do it for me. Sorry for the technical delays we had today. I will be back on Monday, and this time, hopefully, Monday we'll get everything straight and we'll be able to get on the air, and we'll be able to give you a full recap of both college football and the NFL, as well as get you set for the last week of the regular season for Major League Baseball. And with the season that we've had, both in baseball and what's already taken place in the NFL, I'm going to leave you with one song, another Luke Bryan song, off his Crash My Party album, Roller Coaster, because it has been a roller coaster ride already. And I will see you back here on Monday afternoon, right at lunchtime, on WODU, the best in college radio. You're listening to Amped.
She had a cross around her neck and a flower in her hand that I picked from the side of Thomas Drive on our way to the sand. We found an old wooden chair, still warm from the sun. Pushed it back, gave me a kiss with the Bacardi on her lips, and I was done. And we spent that week wide open, upside down beside the ocean. I didn't know where it was going, just trying to keep my heart on the tracks. I should have known that kind of feeling would last longer
Sunday came and it was over. Now she's got me twisted like an old beach roller coaster. The rest of those days turned into long crazy nights. When the music got loud, we'd sneak away from the crowd under the boardwalk lights. And with all the things we said, what I just can't get past is the way we let it in. Now I'm wondering where she is going. I can't get that goodbye back. We spent that week wide open, upside down beside the ocean. I didn't know where it was going, just trying to keep my heart on the tracks. I should have known that kind of feeling would last longer than that week did. Blown away and barely breathing when Sunday came and it was over. Now she's got me twisted like an old beach roller coaster. She's like a song playing over and over in my mind where I still hold her. I had the chance and I should have told her. When we spent that week wide open, upside down.
And that's going to do it for this edition of Amped right here on WODU Studios. And we will be back on Monday afternoon, right at lunchtime. Until then, have a great weekend, and I will see you back here Monday.